is entitled How ITADs Can Help with ESG Goals. This is a very important topic because I think everybody realizes by now that the environmental aspect of this isn't going away. It's not just a passing fad or a trend. It's something that's real, and we need to have a better understanding of it and how we can interact with it. So we've got a group of experts here led by Reich. We're going to talk with Aaron and Brooks. Brendan Egan is not here due to flight issues. He's still trying to make his way here, but we're going to continue on and marshal on. So I'm going to hand the floor over to Reich, and Reich's going to moderate this session. So enjoy.
All right. Well, we are talking about ESG, and I think the title in the guide is how ITADs can help achieve ESG goals. I kind of paraphrase that to say that this is the new requirement for ITAD. You know, from a corporate perspective, from your corporate clients, from your customers, they're looking at you as an ITAD and saying, you know, hey, we got a new requirement here. This is ESG. So we're going to talk about that a bit. You know, starting off here, again, panel, Brendan didn't make it, but if he walks into the middle of this, we, of course, will welcome him. Happy to introduce Brooks Hoffman over on the far left here, or my left. Brooks serves as principal on the product management team for Iron Mountain's Asset Lifecycle Management Service. He's responsible for coordinating the global delivery of secure IT asset disposition services across Iron Mountain's current network of 32 countries. Brooks possesses 18 years of experience in the industry. That's just one more than me, man. That's crazy. Having formerly co-founded and served as CFO for Lifespan, a national ITAD firm based in Denver. He's a member of the ITAM Forum Board of Trustees and is a frequent speaker and author on the subjects of data destruction, third-party certification, and ITAD best practices. Next to him is Aaron Zepper. Did I pronounce that right? Hi, all right, Aaron Zepper. He's CEO of DMD Systems Recovery, a Tempe, Arizona-based ITAD company focused on Fortune 5000 across data center, end-user compute, and mobility asset classes. DMD Systems is NAID AAA certified, R2 certified, and is also a B Corp certified company, which is something we're actually going to talk about this afternoon. Committed to balancing purpose, people, and profit. So I'm excited to have these two veterans with me. My name is Reich Sandlin. I've been in ITAD for 17 years. I kind of have held every role in the ITAD companies, I think, across the industry at Aero, Integra, High Tech Assets, Circle IT, and for the past 4 years, I formed a consulting firm to help other companies figure out this thing called ITAD, whether it's growth and scale, whether it's go-to-market strategies and sales training, or if it's planning new facilities, mergers and acquisitions, et cetera. Along the way, I've been honored to serve, you know, as a leader in the ISRI organization, trade association, you know, working as chairman of the RIOS board of directors and chairman of the R2 technical advisory committee. So it's exciting to have been able to serve as well as make a little bit of money along the way. But today we're talking about ESG. So here's kind of what we're going to go through. We're going to talk about, you know, a brief overview. What is ESG? What really drives ESG in the marketplace? Then we're just going to have a kind of a candid conversation with these two guys, talking about some of the issues around ESG and what it means to them as an ITAD provider, what it means to their clients, and then we'll actually plan to open it for Q&A with you guys. Let you ask them some questions. But ESG, what is it? Well, the E is environment, S is social, and G is governance. Very simple acronym there. But what does it really mean? So we have certain market drivers that are going on, whether it's regulatory drivers, where, for example, the SEC is proposing rules about corporate disclosure of climate change factors. That happened in April. So all public corporations in the U.S. now have to consider climate change, not just climate change of their own company, as greenhouse gas emissions of their own company, but they have to look at their supply chain as well. You have the state of California has done a similar bill, has been proposed. It's not law yet, but it's coming that direction. So that's a big market driver that public and private corporations will start looking at this. We're also seeing public and private investors demand that their investments carry ESG programs in place. So, BlackRock, Fidelity, lots of private equity firms have said, hey, we're not doing any more investing unless you have ESG. I've talked with companies that are buying Itad firms in this industry or wanting to sell Itad firms in this industry, and they are not even looking at companies that don't have some sort of an ESG program in place beyond what you would normally think of in Itad. So that's kind of an interesting direction that the markets are taking. We also have corporate commitments. So the Paris Climate Change Accord said that countries, have to drive towards a net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. Well, over 100 corporations have said, we want to be net zero by 2040. And there are even more aggressive goals than that, 2030 for some of them. So we're really seeing corporate commitments around climate change, but also around social equity, around ethics and other aspects of ESG. One of the problems that we see, and one of the reasons why we're seeing regulators look at this space, is that there's not a consistent standard for how you report ESG. If we take a look at an income statement or a balance sheet of a major corporation, we can kind of compare apples to apples from one corporation to another. But when we look at their claims or their statements around ESG or climate change, it's apples and oranges or bananas or whatever fruit they want to come to the table with. And so we're starting to see some standards being developed around that, whether it's the Carbon Disclosure Project, CDP, GRI, SASB, UN Sustainable Development Goals. There's a lot of different sort of standards out there that people are voluntarily aligning with. We're also seeing some efforts to merge those standards, so there will be one standard. I'm not sure if that's going to happen anytime soon, but that's a direction that things are going. And so it's not just, but those are kind of a combination. You have the climate change aspect. Whether you believe in climate change or not, there's a business reason to work on it. Whether it's climate change or whether it's social aspects or whether it's governance. There's a lot of governance aspects to this that we'll talk about. It's also key in Itad to align with our clients, right? So our clients have been very focused on waste in the past, waste diversion and what's going on with reuse. But we're seeing alignment with the need to align with their emissions goals, with their social impact goals, with their ethics goals, and so forth. And of course, data. All of us Itad providers recognize that data, is one of the most critical factors to keep on top, stay on top of. That can be folded into your ESG program as well. But ultimately, there's reporting, and we'll talk a little bit about reporting as well here this afternoon. Telling your story, being able to take all these different factors, whether it's climate or ethics or social, and roll it together into a story that you're going to tell. So that's the quick rundown of what ESG is. Back to the panel. I'm going to sit down with these guys, and we're going to just have a conversation. All right. Ooh. Hello. So, you guys are industry veterans. I have a lot of respect for both of you and what you've done in your own organizations and in your careers. Aaron, there's something, and we're going to kind of flip the ESG around, right? And we're going to start with the G, governance. And Aaron, you really impressed me that your company committed to the B Corp certification and went through that process. And I've been through that. I've seen what that is. It's not for the faint of heart. Can you talk a little bit about how that affects governance, especially, and because it's a great governance framework?
No, it is. And what's interesting is Well, people ask a lot of questions to me about the B Corp certification we have, and it actually wasn't that difficult for us to get. And I think that boils down to what do you represent as a company? What's the culture you have? I watched the culture session this morning, and it resonated in a lot of ways. But our company was founded around serving the environment and reducing harm to the environment, and that was like the starting point. And the culture just built up around it. And as you got to the B Corp going through the certification process, it quantifies a lot of these things. So the way you treat your employees, what you do for the planet, and it wasn't very difficult for us to go through. It was a lot of work. But what it did do on the backside of it is it created a governance model for us to actually score ourselves and then hold ourselves accountable. So it was things that we didn't really have metrics for. It was things that we didn't really decide how we were going to measure or how we know that we do those things. And going through the process said, okay, here's how you measure it. Here's the way that you check your score. This is how you can quantify it. So for us, it added governance on the backside of it, which really wasn't the intent when we got it. It was just to commit ourselves legally and as board members to making decisions above just profit alone.
Yeah, I think it's a great model for people, planet, and profit. You know, it really examines all of those different aspects and sort of forces you to stare deeply into your organization and what you're committed to.
It does, and there's a lot of areas that we have, we had some big gaps. And so when we go back for our certification, and I guess this next year will be the first 3-year review of it, there's areas that we know we have to raise our score. But it gives us visibility that, hey, compared to a peer class, this is where you're lacking. These are things you don't have. And in some ways, believe it or not, Itad is at a detriment there because of some of the processing we do. So we're already starting behind a lot of these consumer good companies and other ones where they don't have to actually deal with hazardous waste. They don't have to deal with waste streams. And so that was actually a little bit of a challenge for us.
Yeah, I would encourage all of you to take a good hard look at B Corp. It's an amazing program, and will really challenge you to look at your business in a different way. So Brooks and Aaron both, when we think about Itad services, how do we position those to help clients with their own governance?
So the thing that really jumps out to me about Itad and governance is the concept of data security. That's an essential part of governance. And really, in order to do that, you need secure chain of custody. So Iron Mountain is really, long before it got into the Itad business, was in the business of protecting assets that clients valued, whether they're bank records or their data center assets or fine art. And essential to that process is secure chain of custody. So we have over 2,500 vehicles just in North America alone. They're locked, they're alarmed, they're GPS monitored, and we're tracking them in real time so that the data that's resident on the IT assets that we pick up from clients, if they are data bearing when they leave the client's premise, they maintain a secure chain of custody all the way to where they're going to be processed and either overwritten, sanitized, or shredded. And clearly data security is one of the top concerns. Time and time again, when you see market data, ask clients what are they most worried about, what are they most concerned with. Data security, data breaches. The headlines are full of the horror stories. Probably saw a major global investment bank a couple of years ago, $60 million fine for improperly disposing of some data center assets. They used a moving company instead of an Itad company to do it. So clearly there are very serious consequences for not protecting your data. And that's how I think most Itad firms can help their customers with the governance function.
I mean, I would just add on a little bit there. When you think about Itad, in general, you're really talking about two things that we bring value to customers. It's really around data security, and there's an environmental aspect, and then a lot of times you'll hear people talk about value recovery. But if we just focus on the two actual service aspects of it, you have the data security, which is around protecting the data, and then you have the environment, which is ensuring that there's proper recycling, proper reuse, whatever level you want to go through in the vertical stack of ITAD. And then what are we providing back to our customers? It's the governance. And it's validating and quantifying exactly what you do to each device, to each virtual data, and providing that back to them. And so we think about it a lot of, how do we provide a wrapper of governance that's really reporting that allows the customer and allows the client across all their assets, all their locations, to know that they're adhering to whatever principles they laid out and then whatever practices they laid out, and that it's tied back in. So I think that, I don't know that we help them too much with governance other than enable their own governance by providing the data back to them.
Yeah, so it kind of gives fresh meaning to the audit report. We are all familiar with the spreadsheets or the tables, those very detailed audit reports that come out of the ITAD process. They're the deliverable at the end of the ITAD process, but fundamentally it goes to governance. It helps them prove that they've done what they say they do. And
then I think somebody was up here talking about R2V3 and you can always, when you adhere to the certification, whatever standards, eStewards has them, NAID has them, everyone has different standards, but you can go back and help the company craft their governance back to how they're going to dispose of or treat all the different assets. And so I think there's the audit report, there's the detail there, but then if they want to go down into how you process it, what you adhere to, what way you sanitize the data, you can provide that all back to them, or you can even help customers, what are the best practices? Here's your options, here's ways to do it. And I think that's one of the nice things of going through the certifications. It forces you to document the entire process all the way through, which then the customer can ingest as well.
Yeah, I was meeting with the team from ASCDI last night, and they've introduced a new certification that's geared around the ethics on top of R2 and NAID and eStewards and what have you. Let's look at the ethics layer above that. And so when we think about governance, being able to behave ethically is a key part of that too. So let's talk about the S in ESG, social. So, how does ITAD provide social benefit, and how do you align that with clients' goals? Brooks?
So I see Jim Puckett in the audience, so I'm going to give a little shout out to eStewards. There's 2 programs that they've launched that I think really do address the social issue. One is their digital equity program, which facilitates donations of IT equipment to underprivileged communities. So clearly, and apart from the digital equity program, a lot of ITAD firms do facilitate charitable donations. There are a number of companies out there who, when they're getting rid of their assets, they say, "Hey, I don't want to recycle this. I'm not looking to resell it. I want to make a donation. I want to donate it to a charity, or I wanted to make it available to my employees." So that's one route. The other eStewards program, and again, I'm sorry for the gratuitous plugs for eStewards, but I was on their leadership council for a number of years. The Advanced Plus program. I don't know if you folks have seen Bill Morris. He's here at the conference. I think he'll be speaking tomorrow, but terrific program. Basically works with autistic individuals, helps them get trained so that they can be put in an ITAD setting, and the statistics on this workforce are just incredible. They're more productive. They have lower absentee rates. They're terrific workers. So that's clearly an example where the ITAD industry is reaching out to different community that might be disadvantaged and giving them an opportunity to participate. And it's win-win because they get skilled workers who are committed, do a great job. And these folks have an opportunity to seek employment and not just rely on government assistance.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of that. I mean, we see it from our clients, and it's a lot of times around donation programs. There's the employee purchase programs. From a social perspective, I mean, I think at our organization, what we try to do is just focus on, living the ethical aspect of it. So, if you even looked at our values, we commit our values back to our customers, our environment, and our teammates. And then so everything we try to do, and it ties back into the B Corp, is this is who we are, this is what we represent, and we try to build the culture around it. And then typically it's customers that have those same kind of values that end up doing business with us.
That's a great point about the teammates, because health and safety, taking care of your employees, is really a fundamental part of doing social good as well. And so I want to, applaud you guys, applaud all of you that are, ISO or RIO certified, that where you are really focused on the health and safety of your employees. When we think about the ESG initiatives, why don't you, if you can describe just some of the ESG initiatives that each of you have at your companies, and then how do we align those with your internal goals, but also your external goals? Aaron, you mentioned how we interact with our clients. So I think that's important.
Well, so it's interesting because Brooks and I were talking about this before we started, and I think it's reflective of a lot of the organizations that are here in attendance is we're all on a journey. And we're at different places. Iron Mountain is in a different place than we are as DMD, and we are still on that journey. So we just hired a project manager / sustainability manager. So we didn't have a lot of our own internal sustainability goals outside of what we committed to around in B Corp or just the way we had been running our business. And so now we're finally starting to say, okay, we want to be net zero by the end of 2023. What are the steps we have to take on that? And again, it's baby steps. It's, hey, last year we bought a cardboard shredder to take excess cardboard and use it as packing materials. Did that, can I quantify what that did for our organization? No. Can I tell you, how many tons of CO2 we say? No, I can't do a lot of that. But we're on this constant journey. I mean, we had to move out of our original building. So our original building was a net zero building with blue jean insulation, solar panels, et cetera. Well, we outgrew it. And guess what? Now we're in a tilt-up giant place, and I don't know what the ecological, the environmental footprint is of that, and it's like a different challenge that we have to deal with, and so that's what we're dealing with right now.
So Iron Mountain's very committed to ESG, and we do have a number of publicly stated goals. We are a public company. Our employees, our shareholders, our management team, everybody really, really wants these things, and so, we've committed. For instance, very much support diversity, inclusion. So we've gone on record, said we want 40% of our leadership positions to be filled by women by 2025. We want 30% of our leadership positions to be filled by minorities by 2025. Also, on the subject of sort of social good and doing well for our communities, they've established a program called Moving Mountains. And basically what that is Iron Mountain will give employees time off to perform philanthropic activities and to serve either in their communities or charities. And their commitment there is to donate, it's to have employees do 100,000 hours of community service by 2025. So those are some pretty concrete and objective, benchmarks that we've laid out and committed to that over the next 3 years we want to get to.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just interesting to listen to the grand ambition and the things you guys do, and I'm like, oh, well, we just have a rule like we never buy new. So if we, our forklift is used, all of our desks are made internally, and it's like, yeah, someday we hope to keep making the move there, but it's like, how do you bring in the value part?
Think globally, act locally, right?
I love hearing these guys talk because I feel like they need to pause for applause every now and then because some of the great things they're doing, because ESG is a positive story, right? It's not about doing less bad. It's not about not sending stuff to landfills. It's not about child labor. It's about the positive, right? Let's do more good. I mean, let's not do the bad either, but let's do more good, more positive things for the planet, for the people, and make some profit. So yeah, I just feel like applauding every time I hear one of these stories because what we're talking about here, and let me just insert for a moment, we're telling a story. And so as you hear these things, think about your own story. Think about governance, all right? There's a chapter or two of your story. Let's think about social. We just heard some examples of the social story. Let's talk about environment because the E is kind of the the capital E that we all, certainly in this industry, we're very involved in, but ESG and climate change and what's going on out there are kind of challenging us to look at it a different way. So, historically, ITAD's been, a lot of people look at ITAD as a waste diversion program, right? Or, ITAD or electronics recycling. It's about, hey, let's not send this stuff to landfill, or let's not send this stuff to an incinerator. How has that conversation with your clients changed more towards ESG in the past year or two?
I find that I have this conversation, I feel like 3 times a week. And Steve and I from Terra were just talking about it a little bit as well, is, ESG, what's the other one? CSR. There's all these acronyms, there's all these calculators, there's all these things and pressures coming up. Any large corporate organization nowadays has some sort of sustainability officer. They have some sort of sustainability statement. And so those are now making their way to the IT groups and to the people that are subsequently disposing of the assets. And it reminds me a lot of probably like 2007, 2008, when cloud started to become a thing. And I was working at a different organization then, and I remember having conversations with IT directors and VPs of IT, and they're like, I needed to get some cloud. What? Well, I have an objective from corporate that we need to be migrating. I need cloud. Like, that's one of my goals. And it was like, well, what do you need? Well, I need to get some cloud. Well, it's not like a thing. And it's just like this, we're seeing that from sustainability now. Hey, I need some ESG. I need, and it's not that, it's probably not that bland the way they say it, but it really is, hey, we need to start considering the impact we're having. And somebody's sending out a corporate thing, and it's in my goal. So the thing we end up doing is having a conversation with them, because they're looking for ideas. They're, hey, what is ESG? How does it even tie into things we do, et cetera? And for us, a lot of it gets really around to the reuse conversation. And it all gets back to the principle aspect of it. So if we can stay rooted on the principles, that's much more important than the policy. So you put up a couple different acronyms earlier. If you're, some of the accounting laws right now say if for your carbon emissions, depending on which, if you're CDP as an example, you have to take 100% of that carbon footprint the day you buy it. That's what you're going to go report. So it doesn't matter whether you throw it away the next day, you reuse it for 6 more years, you keep it in service for 8 years, it's all doesn't matter, because you've already taken it from the accounting side. But you can step back and have a conversation. What's better for the environment? What's better for our world? Is it better to reuse? Like, what is it? And let's just focus in on the principles, and that's a lot of the conversations we're having. And we've seen, candidly, this year we've already seen 2 of our larger customers go away from shred, which never would have happened without input from sustainability or understanding that they have to make some sort of changes in their process and their policies that more align with what their corporation's stating publicly, what they're committing to. And so we're seeing that happen. Not frequently, but occasionally.
Can you explain that just real quick? The move from away from shred. How does that affect the environment?
So we had one customer that shredded all their drives, and they have a corporate ESG initiative, and every one of them has a fancy name. I can't remember theirs exactly. They'll have cool names around them, and they were basically saying that we need to do something, and we're like, where can we start? Well, what do you guys are shredding all your drives. What do you think that does? Well, you can recycle all the metals. Okay, great. What happens when you shred something? You exert energy to go shred it. You have to collect the materials. You have to send them somewhere. You have to exert energy to repurpose those back into the core item, and then have it made into something else. Well, what if you could reuse the drive? Like, what does that do? What is the effort? What is the expenditure of time, energy, money, carbon, trucking, pick all these things. And so what they did is they sent us a whole bunch of drives, said, okay, for some of them, you guys don't do anything to them. For some of them, do 1 pass. For some 3, some 5. Then their forensic team took them back. We had a little key that said, hey, here's what we did for each of them. They came back and rewrote their MSA to do a 3-pass wipe. Again, can we quantify that's something that they can go count in their in their financial statements, their publicly traded company, and they go use that? I don't know. I can give them the data. I can say, here's how many were reused versus recycled. And guess what? Some failed drives are still going to have to be recycled. And you can go plug them into a calculator. I can give you a calculator. You can use any one of 12 calculators, and you can see what kind of impact it has. But generally, we agree in principle that this is going to be better. The more you can use something without creating something new, the better it is.
I mean, what you just heard is a business impact for your businesses too, right? If you don't have to shred your drives, if you can resell those drives, that's a significant financial impact in addition to the sustainability factor. Brooks, how about you?
Iron Mountain does market research annually, and it's been really interesting to see the topic of ESG and sustainability kind of move up in the league tables. It used to all be about data security, and now we're seeing segments of the market where sustainability is actually their top concern, their top priority. And similar experience where, we had customers that strictly recycle, nope, we want everything scrapped, we want everything shredded, and no amount of discussion of the monetary value of those assets was going to change their mind. When we flipped the paradigm and started talking about the sustainability impact and the fact that it's a much more green process, and that they could even redeploy those assets within their organization, but just extending that life cycle and the impact that would have, that changed the mindset in a number of cases and was the tipping point that got them to allow us to do that.
I just want to jump in for a second because I was sitting in an earlier one on data security, and what you just said really hit something which I'd never really thought about it this way. What do they care about data? Data security was all about what? Reputation and brand. What is the ESG and the sustainability side? It's all about portraying this image or brand back out to the market. So if this is who I am, this is what I'm committing as our company. These are our ideals. These are our values. This is back to a reputation play. And because we're very similarly, it's not a money play. It's not about convincing them, hey, you're going to make an extra $5 by reusing a drive versus shredding it. Nobody cares. They're just like they didn't care about that around data security. They want their reputation.
Absolutely.
All right. So, just a side note, I was at the IATAM conference in Vegas a few weeks ago, and I asked the question in my session of these corporate IT asset managers and directors. I said, how many of you know that your company has ESG goals? Every one of them raised their hands. It's like, okay, cool. How many of you have had those goals filtered down to you as an individual or you as a group, as a working group? Every one of them raised their hands. So this is not something that's kind of off in the future for these corporations. It's a now thing. And we're going to just see those requirements become more and more prevalent.
And Reich, when you were there, did any of them have specific examples? Like, hey, this is what my goal is. So coming back in on the ITAM side.
Good question. We didn't get into the details on that. Maybe you remember one. But
No, I don't. And I think that's, to me, it still goes back to that cloud conversation is they're aware of it. They kind of have some goals, but they're soft a lot of times. Mm-hmm. And then but it's going to happen because it's 3 years from now, they're going to all have a specific number or a specific thing, or name 3 things you did this year that reduced our impact on the environment.
Yeah.
Again, I think if we collectively can be at the table with them providing ideas, you're just going to change that relationship with your customer.
I mean, my team's goals for this year include very specific objectives around hiring, diversity in hiring, around environmental, reporting, and so it's not just something they include in the investor presentations, and it's not just senior management has a couple of ESG goals. It's pushed down throughout the organization.
So if you're serving large corporations, large organizations as your clients, then you kind of need to be aware of what their goals are, what their motivations are. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, greenhouse gas emissions, GHG. We're not going to go into a great deal of detail here on Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3, but I'll give you a quick primer on that. Scope 1 is how you calculate your direct emissions, stuff that's going up a smokestack or out a tailpipe. That's your scope 1 emissions. Scope 2 is sort of still things that you control, but it's a little bit more indirect. It's the power you buy from the grid. So it's a little bit less direct, but it is specifically attributable to your own activity. And then scope 3 is really your kind of everything else, right? It's the supply chain, both inbound and outbound. It's it's the cardboard you buy and supplies. It's kind of everything else that could be measured around greenhouse gas emissions. Brooks, does that cover it from your understanding of scope 1, 2, and 3?
It does. I've been getting a bit of a crash course in this myself recently. So
Yeah. So I've been helping a couple of Itad companies kind of figure this out and do their own calculations right now. So it's an active thing. But I guess the question here is, from your two perspectives, are you on this journey of reducing, measuring and reducing your greenhouse gas emissions for your companies, and what kind of ideas can you provide around that?
So let me speak retrospectively and proactively, prospectively. So Iron Mountain has reduced its total greenhouse gas emissions from 540,000 tons in 2016 to 217,000 tons last year, so over half. We're committed to being carbon neutral by 2040. And part of that, a major part of that program, is that we have a fleet of over 5,000 vehicles worldwide. They are all going to be electric vehicles by 2030. So we have a number of, environmental goals. We operate data centers. One of the products we developed for our data centers was something called a Green Power Pass. As many of you are probably aware, data centers use a tremendous amount of electricity. The estimate I've seen is they use 3% of the energy worldwide every year. So we have a product that we offer our clients where they can buy a Green Power Pass, which means that all the power that's used to operate their equipment in that data center is from sustainable, renewable sources. So again, pretty heavily committed towards not just talking the talk, but walking the walk on the greenhouse gas side.
We're not as far along on the journey, but it's also somewhat more ingrained in our culture, is kind of the way that I would say it. So as an example, we don't have plastic utensils at our place. And so when we cater lunch, we have plates that everyone's supposed to wash and keep around the reuse. We talked about forklifts earlier. We talked about any of the racking goes in, it's all used. It's, the power switches that are automatic as you walk by. But those are all just things that we've always done. We are just at like I mentioned, we just hired somebody to focus on that for us as a sustainability manager. And so we have to come back and measure those exactly and say, these are our scope 1, 2, and 3. And we haven't done it in the past. But it is on our radar. And again, it's something that we feel like we should be aligning with the very same things that our clients are doing.
Aaron, I think you mentioned calculators, right? So there's a lot of calculators out there for Itad. Have you been able to quantify the greenhouse gas benefits of reuse and recycling and in your reports to clients?
So we do, and we just use the EPA calculator. And the point that we have in the conversation we have with our clients is, you can have your own calculator. You can have 7 calculators. Your finance team can have a calculator. Your ESG team can have a calculator. Everyone can have their own. That's fine. But what we'll also do is provide you the raw data. And so if you calculate the embedded energy that was used to create the drive at X, and Apple's using Y, and eBay, they just put out their re-commerce report, they're using Z, like they're all different. And your number's gonna change depending upon which one you use. But the fact is, if I provide the data, here's how many assets we took in, here's how many were reused, here's how many were recycled, these are the classes they're broken out into, you can lump them together, you can segment them, you can do what you want with the data. And what we should be looking at and talking about is, as you're progressing, Mr. Client, is that reuse number getting larger? Because if we can just agree in principle that it's better to reuse than to recycle, then the bigger that number gets as a percentage, or the higher that percentage is, the better job you're doing. Heck, the number may even go down because you decide, to Brooke's earlier point, to extend the life of things. So you may have less assets coming out. That's okay too, but you're going to have to figure that out. So you can see it. We'll give you ones, and there's paper after paper about what it should be, or what they calculate it to be.
Well, one of the things we do, and we provide extensive environmental reporting as well, you mentioned reuse. We show clients, here's how many assets were designated for reuse that got reused or remarketed. And by the way, here's the total number that could have been. So if they're, not reaching their full potential on the reuse side, they can see sort of the delta between what they actually did and what the potential is, so that they can hopefully drive that number to full 100%.
So your reporting to clients is not just how many of different things happen. You're actually doing some deeper analysis of
Correct.
Trends and what's going on there. That's
Correct.
cool. All right, so we're hearing our story is being built, right? We're writing that story, and we just talked about environment, but now let's talk about telling that story, right? Unfortunately, Brendan couldn't make it. He told the story for ERI, and that was pretty powerful. But I guess the question for you guys is, as you talk about the story with your clients, with your employees, what's your process for crafting that story, for building that theme and storyline to tell?
Yeah, I usually start, there's a couple different ways. I'll start with our teammates, because it's probably the easiest, and everyone in our company has a little one-pager that has all these different things, and it starts with, what was the mission overall, and it was to help reduce our landfills one IT asset at a time. Like, that's it. It's pretty simple. So it's very environmentally focused. We do it by offering our service, and then we kind of build that out over time to what is it we specifically do. So as you keep building that up, it becomes, we're accountable to our planet, our customers, our environment, our teammates, and our customers, and we help them around accountability. We help them around security. We're guardians and caretakers. So we start building this story that way, and then ultimately ends up in, it's around, if people come on a tour, they see how we, everything's repurposed. They see how we've built our own desks. They go through, and so for our teammates, they see it day in, day out, and they understand it. We, things like, I forget what we even used to call them, but we call everything in there an asset. We changed, there's no such thing as scrap at our place. Like some of these places, when I got there, hey, this is our scrap pile. What does a scrap pile sound like? It doesn't sound like I'm really taking care of anything. It doesn't sound like I'm putting value on it. It's an asset. It's a commodity. It's, what are these things? And just changing that vernacular and vocabulary. And that comes out then when you start to talk to your customers. So you tell them how things started. You can tell them what we do, the care you put into it. And I think that's a lot of how we do it. So it starts with our teammates and extends out to the customers.
It's interesting that you mention, nomenclature, because we have really worked hard to get away from the term e-waste and talk about waste. We're trying to shift the mindset with a customer, thinking about, this is junk that I need to get rid of and dispose of, and it's a cost, and turn that into, I'm making an investment in sustainability, and I'm protecting my brand, I'm promoting my brand by demonstrating that I'm a green company, I'm safeguarding my data, I'm extending the life cycle of my assets, and yeah, there may be some upfront costs associated with that, but the return in terms of not getting fined $60 million or the increase in the market cap of my company because I'm perceived as a green company and a sustainable company, it's paying off many-fold. So we're really focusing really more on, again, a return on investment model as opposed to a fee-for-service model.
Good. So, I'm going to move us forward here because I want to give us time for some Q&A here at the end. But, different, Aaron, you talked about the journey, right? And different companies are at different points in this journey. And some have strengths, some have weaknesses. How transparent should they be about their weaknesses as they tell their story?
Yeah, I guess is that what they call, like lying by omission or something? No, but for us, we just try to, and hopefully this comes out in most of the things we talk about, we just try to be truthful. And this is what we do, this is what we don't do. If your business model is this, we align. If it's not, we don't. And if you looked at most of our customers, if you are if you want your stuff shredded, you're not my customer. And it's not that I don't like you, we're just not going to be a good fit. And so I think we talk about it, we have a single site. And some people look at that as a detriment. Again, depends on what you need and how you're thinking about it. We think, again, we cater towards large corporate customers, but we focus in on the governance side because with 7 data centers, they typically have 7 data center managers picking 7 different Itad vendors, and some are recyclers, and some are Itad, and some are brokers, and some are third-party maintenance with services. Like it's this whole wide array of things, and they're not all wiping the same way. They're not providing the same the same data points back. They're not being able to ingest that back into the ITSM and say, okay, I can validate the physical destruction of it, or that this is who took ownership of it, or this is the wipe log attached to it. Like, no, they're not doing those things. And so if that's what we do, then that's what I want to sell. And if that's not something that's interesting to you, or you want to let everyone have autonomy, we're probably not a good fit for you. So our approach is to be as straightforward as possible. I'm sure there's things that we leave out that either we don't view as important or it's not core to it, but I would hope that we're as transparent as possible. And I think it's always the easiest because, it's just like telling the truth, and you can't get caught in a lie.
Indeed. All right, I'm going to pause us here and just take some questions from the audience. If you guys have any questions for the three of us, happy to field those. Yeah, Kevin?
No, I appreciate the comments, and Aaron and Brooks, I appreciate your transparency. I'm a believer in the ESG and the other actions that are being required. What I struggle with, though, is all the positive that I'm hearing, and it has to be a whole lot of work and a whole lot of challenges. I can only imagine, like you brought up, Aaron, you put yourself out there that this is what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, and it's the best for the world. And then your client says, what's your cost to erase and what's your cost to shred? Okay, I'm going to shred. That's a tough challenge,
Who are you talking to within the organization? Because you might get a different response. If you're talking to procurement, I can absolutely see that's the answer you're getting. But if you're talking to the chief sustainability officer or the chief compliance officer, they might have different priorities. They might be more open to a different mindset.
And Brooke, I've talked to them all, and the person that makes the decisions looking at the dollar, and that's what we're up against.
So, this is, and we do this, and we have to do it again, and we have a Friday meeting every Friday where we go through every new contract, every lot created, every lot received, every lot set, everything, and we realize that there's people that shouldn't be our customer. And it has to do with the way they do things, what they demand, what they ask for. Maybe that shouldn't be your customer. And I think a lot of it goes back to when you're aligned with your customers and you see things from a similar vantage point, it gets a lot easier with that relationship, and there's value. And again, I heard somebody talking this morning about the anything from AFM or anything for money. And if some people are all, I want the most money, and this is how we do it, and I'm going to auction this, and I'm going to do this. Okay, good, that's great. Like, I don't have the cycles for it. I'm not going to do it. But there's other people that do, and that's their business model, and that's great.
Yeah, and you're not going to be able to get everybody away from money, right? That's got to be a part of the conversation. You hope that you're talking to a stakeholder that's got a balanced view of that, right? It's not just money, it's also risk, it's also, in data and compliance, but it's also sustainability and social ethics, and, it's a bigger picture than that. As Brooks said, you might be able to talk to a different stakeholder, and that's a good thing. If you can bring other people into that mix, into that decision-making process. But it's not always going to be the case. It's going to take time for all these corporations to think of from a balanced perspective. So yeah, try to have that conversation and educate them where you can.
Do you have other clients that it resonates with?
I want to monopolize the questions, but some of them get it, some of them don't. But all I can do is put myself in your shoes that, I believe in what you're doing. There has to be a whole lot of challenges that the two of you go through implementing this within your company.
That's why we make the big bucks. Oh, of course it's a challenge. But any new way of thinking, any paradigm shift takes time and takes effort. But I really think there's momentum behind this. And I do think you're going to see over time, this is the direction more and more clients are going to go. And to Aaron's point, you can't be all things to all people. And if we're never going to be the low price based on our business model, nor do we want to be. We're selling Rolexes, not Swatches.
You seen the new Omega Swatch?
And I understand the challenges, and I guess I was looking for workarounds, how to resolve some of those challenges that you run across.
Again, I think it comes down to education and trying to find the right stakeholder within the organization. But you got to cut your losses at some point. I mean, if you keep coming around to price, after a few times, it's time to just move on.
Yeah, I would agree. And I mean, if you look at who most of our customers are, almost all of them have some sort of stated ESG goals. And so I already know that we're aligned, and then when we approach new ones, and some of them don't work out. I can think of approaching Brown-Forman, who makes Jack Daniels, and they have this big ESG, they publish their report, and they don't care. When he got back to it, like their stakeholders in IT don't care. And at some point, I think that the values of the company will overtake that, or they'll get new leaders, or something else will happen. But we already kind of know who we're going after because of that.
So, yeah, maybe remind them of those corporate ESG goals and see how that can apply to the decision there. Yeah. Other questions? Yes, in the back.
You mentioned about different groups or organizations working at these schools, whether it's CSR, is there any particular group or organization taking the lead on that, establishing, hey, this is what is going to be the benchmark for the industry?
GRI, SASB, and some of those have already started the integration process. They've got an agreement that they are going to pursue integration, but I'm not sure how long that's going to be. So I think there's about 4 or 5 that are trying to merge together right now. Brooks, are you aware of the details on that? Or?
Yeah, I think it's going to take some time. Just like we don't have one Itad standard or certification. There's probably going to be multiple for a while.
Yeah. Yes.
Hi. When you talk about being carbon neutral, the deliverable to that is no carbon dioxide being released into the atmosphere.
No,
No. Okay.
it's a net figure. So it's not that you don't emit any carbon dioxide. It's that you take steps to offset your footprint.
Agreed. I should have said net. I guess the question I have is when you're figuring out the formula, the input for that deliverable, so the inputs and the outputs, the offsets, how far do you go? Like, so I see very broad goals. So if I, for example, were going to move to all electric automobiles, do I go down as far as my teammates that have to drive to work?
That would be in the scope 3. So you got to kind of set your boundaries. We're going to look at scope 1 first, and then we're going to look at scope 2. Scope 3 is a little bit more of the Wild West. It's really difficult to calculate scope 3 in a holistic manner. So your teammates' commute, it would be a scope 3 factor. Unless you provided them the automobile, which I guess might fall under scope 1, but yeah. And when we talk about carbon neutral or net zero, it's not just carbon dioxide, it's also methane and a bunch of other greenhouse gases, but they kind of merge all those into CO2 equivalent. Because CO2 is the big one.
And I would say don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, right? So now, are you going to be able to calculate absolutely everything based on every ancillary effect or part of your sort of ecosystem? No, you're not. But that doesn't mean you can't start with maybe your biggest sources of emission or your most direct impacts and start with those and start quantifying those and work directionally towards expanding what you can measure and also reducing your impact of what you are measuring.
Yeah.
I was just going to say something that just popped in my head was a statistic from Gartner that I think would be kind of interesting for as you work with different clients. So people are focused primarily on scope 1 and right now, and scope 2 seems to be dominating more of the press. Hey, because it's easy to calculate. I know how much electricity my data center used. I can go pursue that. Like I get a bill and I can figure it out. But within scope 3 and IT, they estimate it's 50% roughly. Gartner has it between 40 and 70% of most corporate IT CO2 scope 3 is going to come from the IT assets. So that's, it's not here yet, but when they start worrying about scope 3, it's going to hit this industry in a big way.
All right, we're kind of running up on time here, so let's wrap up. I guess let me close with you two guys. What advice would you give an ITAD company that's starting their journey, that's starting their work on ESG? Where should they start?
I kind of have two pieces of advice that sound a little bit mutually exclusive or conflicting, but they're not. One is to think big, think outside the box. Think about where you want to be in 10 years and what you can do to really make a serious impact. And then start small. It's an old Chinese proverb that I love, which is that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So, aim high and, make the journey one step at a time.
Yeah, I echo that. The first thing that popped in my head was just start. So do something and get the ball rolling, get your employees involved, get your teammates involved, and then just really lay out your vision. Where do you want to be? And start living that vision.
Yeah, and a lot of it has to do with mission lock, right? Have you established this is our mission as an organization? Let's pursue it and get everybody rallied behind that. I think that's good. All right, so just wrapping up, we're really talking about the journey, and we're talking about your story, and being able to start the journey, but record your story as you do. Let's understand what the story is that you're going to tell. What story do you want your employees to tell? What do you want your clients to hear? What do you want your shareholders to hear? Be able to craft that story as you take the journey. So thank you all for joining us. Brooks and Aaron, thank you for joining as well.